What's up guys, Eric Vasquez here, back with a brand new video as part of our Design Basics video series. Now in case you haven't checked out the first video that we did on negative space, be sure to head over to Design Cuts or the Design Cuts YouTube channel to check that out. Now today we're going to be talking about working with lines. And it reminded me of a time way back when I was in college, and my professor asked us a very simple question, and she said, "What is a line and how do you define it?" And well, I would ask you guys the same question. Take a second, think about it. Okay. Well, if you think about it, really, a line is just a continuous dot. All right. Most people may not define it that way, but that's essentially all it really is. So, in this lesson, I'm going to be talking to you guys about different ways that you can use lines in your artwork. It's not just about making brush strokes or just a simple, line going across underlining your text or anything like that. But you can use it in a bunch of different ways, and I'm going to show you some of those ways in this lesson. So let's jump over to Adobe Illustrator and get started. I'm just going to type out a little bit of text here. Now, let's say that you're working on something like a business card design, for example, right? Or anytime you have some, groups of information that you want to customize. Let's say I'm just going to type out a couple lines of text here, just so I can give you guys an example. Now, if you have something like this, and then maybe you have, a phone number in here, maybe you have an email address. Let's say Oscorp would be the appropriate, harry@oscorp.com. All right, and then you've got, oscorp.com. All right, so you've got some basic information in here. You've got the name, the title, and then the contact information, right? Like kind of like you would have on a standard type of business card or something. Now we can mix up these typefaces a little bit if you want to. That's not really, the most important thing in the world, but I'll do it just to mix it up a little bit. All right, so let's just go with another kind of clean looking sans serif font here. Maybe something like Avenir, one of my favorites to work with. And I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller. All right, and maybe then I'll change this from like a Roman style to say black or something like that. All right, so here we go. We've got our information. Now, this looks pretty boring like this, so if I just make a copy of it, and all I'm doing to make that copy is just dragging the text over while holding Alt, Option, and Shift on the keyboard. So it's a quick little tip, good shortcut for you guys to know anytime that you're working in Adobe Illustrator. Now, let's grab the pen tool for a second, and I'm just going to press Shift and X on the keyboard so that I can change from a solid black fill color to a black stroke. Now, if I just click underneath here, hold the Shift key, make another point over here, you can see that I've just created a very basic line. And I can do what I just mentioned before and drag that line up while holding Alt, Option, Shift to make a copy of it. And now I've just broken this information up even more. So let's go ahead and take these lines of text maybe, and we can kind of, stack it, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Okay, another kind of way that you can do this is if you wanted to put this whole thing inside of a box, all right? But this is going to be an outline. Okay, so instead of just working with a straight line, you can take these lines and use it to help you kind of contain your information. So lines are very effective for things like creating borders, grouping and breaking up your information. And there's a lot of different types of lines that you can do this with, which I'll show you guys in just a second. All right, so you've got your mobile, your email, and your web. All right, something like that. And we can just make this a little bit bolder. All right, I mean, it gets the idea across, so you guys can kind of see, where I'm going with this here, right? And then maybe you have, another icon over here or something like that, just to fill in the space a little bit. And again, you can add even another line here if you wanted to, and then say you have a logo or something like that in this corner, right? So you can see that instantly, just by working with these lines like this, we've already made our design here, our mock-up business card or whatever this is, a lot more interesting. Now, if I were to select all of my text, right, let's grab all these layers, and I'm just going to lock it, which you can do by pressing Command-Control-2 or coming up to the Object menu and choosing Lock Selection. Now, when I click and drag around this, I will only be selecting the lines. Now, once I have these lines selected, what you want to do is open up your stroke panel. And if you don't see this right away, it's under the window menu all the way down here. All right, and the keyboard shortcut for that is Command, Control, and F10. Now, once you have this open, you can see that we can change the weight of our line right away. Make it a bolder line, a thinner line. Hell, we can even make this a dotted line if we want, or a dashed line. All right, there's a lot of different types of lines that we can use here, and they all start to create these different effects. All right, but one of the cool things that I like about this is that in the stroke panel in Illustrator here, you can even customize this. You can say, the values that you want for the lines and the spaces in between them. All right, let's say we do the dash itself is 0, the gap is maybe 4. All right, and you can begin to space it out. But what you want to do here is then change it to a rounded cap. Okay, and you can kind of round the corners there. And then just play around with these settings a little bit. Maybe then change the weight back down to 0.5 or even, a little bit heavier like 0.2. And you can kind of see what we're going for here. In addition to using lines in this way to break up information or contain information, we can also do kind of custom lines, especially if you are working with an illustration or creating an illustration in Illustrator. So let me show you how that works. So if again, I select my lines over here, and now I can go ahead and open up my brushes. Now Illustrator has a ton of custom brushes that you guys can work with. And if you want to load any of those up, you just come up here to the brush panel, click on the hamburger menu in the top right, and go to Open Brush Library. Now once you're in here, you can choose, let's say for example, some of these artistic brushes. I like to use the chalk, charcoal, pencil brushes, and then you can open those up here. And now by selecting one of these, you can give all of your lines a much more kind of custom look. So let me just check off dashed line for a second so that you guys can get a better sense of how this looks. You can see already just by doing that, it gives it a much more kind of, hand-drawn type of feel, right? It emulates that chalk and charcoal kind of feel. So these are just a few more types of lines that you can work with and how you can use them to break up information, to group things within a design. So now that I've kind of talked to you guys a little bit about how you can use lines for this type of purpose, let me show you guys how you can do something similar, but working with illustrations. So I'm just going to move my stroke and brushes panel over here, move over to my other artboard, and I'm just going to turn on this other layer here that I have. All right, so the illustrations that I'm going to be working with here are courtesy of Mr. Vintage, and you guys can pick these up over at the Design Cuts Marketplace if you feel so inclined and you want to use these same illustrations. There's a lot of cool stuff in here that you guys can use for your work, especially if you're creating any kind of, poster, flyer, or anything that you want to have a cool musical vintage feel. So let me show you guys how you can use lines in this instance. As you can see, I've got a couple of cool instruments here. We've got a piano, a drum, some headphones. So let's just select this right here, and I'm just going to make a copy. Let me make it a little bit smaller. Now you can see that the lines here are relatively thin. The lines are being used not only contour outlines to define the outer bounds of the shape, but lines are also being used to indicate some shading here. So if I select this and I come back to my stroke panel, I can add a stroke to it. And you see that by thickening those lines up, we're instantly creating a more bold version of that instrument. But if I push it even further and you start to creep up here into like 10-point stroke or even 20-point stroke, you do lose a lot of that detail. And the same thing with something like these headphones, right? If I blow it up, you can actually see it better now because there's so many lines in here in the small version that you start to lose some of that great detail. So by blowing this up, you can really see what those lines look like. So in either case, I probably wouldn't need to add much of an outline to this unless you wanted to make it bolder, heavier, and thicker. Okay, but what's interesting about these is that, you can kind of apply these same brushes to it. If you wanted to add say an outline to it, it may take a couple of seconds to render, but you can see in this case, it totally kind of loses all of that information in there. So maybe let's go ahead and try it instead with this piano. All right, I'm just going to delete that for a second. Make that a little bit larger, and I'm just dragging outwards while holding Alt, Option, and Shift to make that bigger. All right, and let's try that again. So if I add a stroke here, come over to my brushes, and I'll select this charcoal feather brush. Now, when I do that, you can see how much it really roughens up the look of this piano. So if I wanted to apply this effect to any type of illustration, it would be a really effective way to customize the look and feel of it. So it really changes up the look and feel of any type of illustration that you're working with. All right, so we'll just do a quick side-by-side comparison so you guys can kind of see. I don't want it to be quite that thick. Maybe we'll go to like 0.5 or 0.25. All right, but you get the idea. You can see how all these different types of lines can really change the personality and the feel of the artwork. So now you guys see a couple of examples of the different types of lines and how they can be used in your artwork. It's a great device to use and it's really helpful, and it just adds a little something extra to your designs. So hopefully you guys found this tip to be useful, this lesson, where we're covering this topic. If you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave your thoughts, comments down below, and go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Give us a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to the Design Cuts YouTube channel for more great content just like this. My name is Eric Vasquez, and we'll see you next time.